And Anastasia Churkina joins me now from our studios in New York. And here in Washington, D.C., I'm joined by someone also very familiar with what's going on at Guantanamo, Colonel Morris Davis, former chief prosecutor at Gitmo. Nastia, I want to start with you. How closely are those who work at the prison and are involved in the legal process there, or even detained there, how closely are they following this debate stateside, following the promises the president has made, and the recent moves he's made toward closing the facility? And what do they make of it all?
Well, Sam, curiously, it's oftentimes when we spoke with officials at Gitmo, it sounded a little bit like they're not really paying too close attention in terms of when this facility is going to be shut down. Many of the personnel employed there, it's just another deployment for them. For many of them, a very kind of proud location to work at. And because there's been so much back and forth coming from the White House in terms of what exactly to do with these detainees, it seems like many of the officials on the ground, at least, have stopped kind of paying attention, and they just don't know, and they're just waiting to hear what's going to happen. In terms of the detainees, we certainly, having spoken to countless lawyers, know that they follow certainly very closely what's going to happen to them because of these indefinite conditions they're being held in. For one, we know we've been told that they watch RT as one of their news sources. So, certainly the detainees are watching everything closely. In terms of officials, not so much.
Colonel Davis, when you were there, is it kind of a bubble there? Are people aware of the kind of coverage that Guantanamo gets around the world and the kind of debate that's going on in the United States about it?
They do. I think they're very conscious of it. But you have to go back to the beginning. Recall, this was not a mission the military ever wanted. This was a decision made by political appointees in the Bush administration to try to avoid the law. And the uniformed judge advocates general were all opposed. So this is not a mission the military wanted 12 years ago, and I don't think they still want it today.
And I remember you told me that last time we talked about this, that you guys kind of went along with it, trusting that you would make that this would be looked at later, kind of like the Nuremberg trials were looked at. But we know now it didn't work out. You were an integral process of the military justice system there. What are the flaws in it? Why has it not been able to do what ideally it should be doing?
Well, the process that started under President Bush, 12 years ago today, he signed the order that authorized military commissions. And then in 2006, the U.S. Supreme Court said it wasn't a lawful order, that it was unconstitutional, violated the Geneva Conventions, and shut it down. Congress passed the Military Commissions Act of 2006. Then in 2009, President Obama got another Military Commissions Act. So we've tried and tried and tried and failed. And even Attorney General Holder said last week that in hindsight, they should have prosecuted Khalid Sheikh Mohammed and the others in federal court back in 2009. So if that was the right decision then, it's still the right decision now. And just to perpetuate, this 12 years of failure at Guantanamo just continues to undermine America's reputation.
And you said civilian trials. I mean, there's been fewer than 7, I think, actual military commissions that have been attempted. Meanwhile, there's been how many civilian trials have gone
Hundreds.
through?
And the 7 military commissions, they were all convicted of providing material support for terrorism, which the Court of Appeals here in Washington said is not a legitimate law of war offense. So we've convicted 7 people of a crime that's not a crime.
Anastasia, is fear what's ultimately keeping the prison open? I saw in your report, Captain Robert Duran noted that anytime someone is released, quote, we assume a risk. That suggests fear is the motivating factor here. And just how founded is this fear that people who are released will come back and strike America?
Well, the problem of releasing the detainees that we've heard a lot on the ground was that this particular concern that they're going to return to committing certain acts of terrorism and being back to being involved in the war on terror. And the numbers that U.S. officials are citing are at over 25%, which seems, at least to me personally, a little bit excessive because of all of these people that were detained, if they ended up being released and not charged and not seen as dangerous, why is it that these huge numbers return to the battlefield according to U.S. officials? Why release them in the first place, and why hold them there for so long without really investigating these personalities if that's what this prison is there for? I think that's a pretty big question. But in terms of the fear, it's a very popular concern that even the existence of this prison itself just ends up fueling more anti-American sentiment. So certainly it's just like a vicious circle, and I don't think many people these days consider Guantanamo to be a cure of anything at this point.
Colonel Davis, there's two events on the horizon here. There's a new National Defense Authorization Act that's going to be debated on at the end of this year. That's usually been used to deal with Guantanamo. And at the end of, or sometime next year, the war in Afghanistan is supposedly going to end. Of course, that was passed with the authorization for use of military force, which underpins Guantanamo. When the war in Afghanistan ends, does the AUMF go away, and what does that do to Guantanamo?
Well, it does. I mean, that's been kind of a debated argument on whether that was a legitimate justification, this law of war, you can detain the enemy notion, but certainly even that notion ends come 2014. So there's about 13 months for the U.S. government to figure out what they're going to do with these guys. Can they make up a new legal fiction to justify keeping them, or do they do the right thing and begin repatriating the ones that need to go home and prosecuting the ones that need to be prosecuted? But it passed, the NDAA this passed out of the Senate Armed Services Committee gives the president more authority. So I'm hoping that the Senate will pass that when it comes up next week.
Right, there's that waiver, national security waiver, that the president still hasn't used, and will be able to use it again. We'll see what happens. RT's Anastasia Churkina in New York and Colonel Morris Davis, former chief prosecutor at Gitmo here in D.C. Thank you both.